So last year, right around this time, I had what is now one of my favorite aesthetic treatments done, and I have to tell you guys all about it. So I remember scrolling Instagram and coming across a post from a local woman-owned business that showed a gnarly-looking device hovering over a patient's face, and the caption read something along the lines of, "Now that boat season is over, get rid of the sun damage with our laser facial." I had heard of laser facials before, but I wasn't totally sure exactly what they were for. Then I saw the after photo of this business's patient, and I was shocked. Of course, I had to try it for myself, so I booked myself an appointment at Medicine-Based Beauty and never looked back. Medicine-Based Beauty is your go-to clinic for medical-grade aesthetic services that blend art and science. They offer Botox, fillers, laser treatments, microneedling, and wellness therapies. And they have highly trained professionals that tailor each treatment to enhance your natural beauty. With locations in Ithaca and Syracuse, Medicine-Based Beauty ensures safety and exceptional results for every client. Are you ready to start your beauty journey? Schedule your appointment today by visiting their website at medicinebasedbeauty.com or calling 315-920-0012. Elevate your beauty routine with Medicine-Based Beauty. You will not regret it. Are you a professional woman in Central New York looking to connect with a community that values local talent? Unlock your career's potential with the CNY Women's Network online business directory. For just $9 a month, you can enjoy a premier listing that connects you with a community of engaged customers, recruiters, and executives eager to discover you. Getting started is easy. Simply click the link in the show notes to purchase your listing, and your profile will be live within 72 hours. And one more thing, as a valued listener of the Cultivate CNY podcast, you get 20% off your first month with us. Just use the code Cultivate20 at checkout. That's 20% off your first month with the CNY Women's Network online business directory when you use the code Cultivate20 at checkout. Don't miss out on the opportunity to grow your career and attract new opportunities. Join the CNY Women's Network directory today to be seen, connected, and hired. Hey guys, welcome back to Cultivate CNY. I'm your host, Alex Canavan, founder of CNY Women's Network, and I am so excited about this week's guest. She is an absolute pillar of the Syracuse community, and I think you guys are going to love this episode. Lauren Kochian is the president of The Most, a hands-on science and technology museum located in the historic Armory Square in downtown Syracuse. In this episode, we talk about Lauren's background and what led her to become the president of The Most, her tools for leadership, and the future of STEM in Central New York. Without further ado, let's welcome Lauren Kochian to Cultivate CNY. Lauren Kochian, welcome to Cultivate CNY.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It is a pleasure to be here.
I've been dying to get you on the pod for quite a while. All of the things, and now you're here, and it was quick and easy, just like that.
Awesome, good. I'm glad. Yeah.
So, I typically, the first time people are on, at least, I have everybody tell us how they got here, and you are not only the president of The Most, but you really have become I think a Syracuse staple, like who you are and how you serve the community. You're a pillar of it. So let's tell people, who is Lauren Kochian? What is your background and how'd you get here?
Sure. Okay. Well, thank you. I'm honored that you said that. My name is Lauren Kochian. I am a lifetime Syracusan, moved away for just a little while. So I was born and raised here. I went to Syracuse University, where I got my bachelor's in public relations. Growing up, I was a talker and a writer and pretty extroverted. So my mom was like, I think you should major in something with communications. And so obviously SU is a great place for that. But what I thought I wanted to do was work in sports. I was mentioning to you off camera, I'm not athletic, but I do love sports. I love watching sports. And so I really thought that's what I wanted, was sports marketing or communications. Maybe I thought if I was smart enough, I could go to law school, become an agent. And so at that time, there was no, I really sort of built my own major. I was a PR major, but I did all of these sports internships, and I landed a job doing PR for an AHL hockey team, so American Hockey League, which is like what the Crunch plays in, for the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins. And I was like, yes, right out of college, like this is a great job, but I didn't like it. I really didn't enjoy it. It wasn't sort of this fun, glamorous thing that I thought it was going to be. And and even though, there was definitely some fun, positive things about it in the short term, I actually knew right away long term this wasn't where I wanted to be. And I was only 21 and living on my own. And um, my mom was like, well, why don't you just come home, go to grad school, and sort of figure it out from there? You don't have to be. So I did that for about not quite 2 hockey seasons. And then I came home and got my master's at SU, and I never left. Uh, the master's was media management, which I think is one of those majors I wish everybody could get a degree in it, because it was communications and writing and all of those important things. Um, but there was also half of the MBA. So I think whatever you do, I think people can benefit from learning about finance and accounting and business in general. And I decided to stay in Syracuse. My boyfriend at the time, who then I married, was working on his PhD at SU, so I knew I was going to be here for a while anyway. And I got a job at right out of grad school at Syracuse Stage. So that was my first nonprofit experience, but it was the marketing and communications that I had studied, and so and that was an amazing place to work. I worked there for 11 years, and I really learned a lot about everything. I almost feel like I grew up there in a way, because I started in my early 20s. I got married there. I had 2 kids there. I got divorced there. So a lot happened in my life in those 11 years. And I worked with these amazing people, learned a lot. And then I took a job. Specifically career wise, what I learned was that I was really good at fundraising. And I think that is sort of part of my personality. One, I'm competitive, so I don't like people to say no. So I was pretty tenacious in my fundraising. Probably naively a little tenacious now that I think back about it. But I really enjoyed it too. It's doing fundraising and working in a nonprofit is a really great way to meet people, to learn about the community, to form relationships. I mean, somebody that's donating either their personal money or their corporate sponsorships. I mean, there's they have an interest in and a commitment in what you're doing. And so I really learned a lot about philanthropy at that time too. And then I took a job, sort of a little bit of a pivot, doing the same work in marketing and fundraising, but at Arc of Onondaga, which is human services for people with developmental disabilities. And I did that for several years, I want to say about 5 or 6 years, before I was actually recruited to work at the Most. And I was recruited to work there again for my fundraising and marketing background. And because at that time, which I'm obviously dating myself here, using a lot of social media for marketing was, I wouldn't say new, but maybe newer to the nonprofit world. And I did a lot of that at ARC. And that was part of the reason I was, I think, recruited to come, was to bring some of that social media marketing to the museum. And the museum was in a transition time where attendance was down, and the museum was just struggling, as a lot of nonprofits do from time to time. And so the hope was that with my fundraising and marketing experience, we could sort of bring that back up to where it used to be, which we're still working on, actually. 9 years later, it's still a work in progress, but we've done a lot in that time. And so right now, as I'm the president of the Most, and I have a single mom of I used to say 2 teenagers. I can't say that anymore. I have a 20-year-old and a 16-year-old, which is basically like another couple of careers in and of itself.
I was going to
to
say,
raise kids.
so you talk about how social media was kind of new, but you had already forged this really great career in, the marketing and PR space within our community. So what did that look like at the time? Was it just a lot of emailing and coffee dates, or like how did you make those connections and like really, get the word out about the mission?
It was a little bit of everything. And I think one of the things I've learned in my years is sort of everything is like a healthy mix, right? As far as fundraising goes, for example, a $5 donation is meaningful, right? A $500,000 donation is also meaningful and maybe more impactful, but everything is a healthy blend. Um, and so I think as far as that goes, it was a little bit of everything. Emails, I've found that can't beat relationship building when there's a face-to-face interaction, or a phone call. One of the things about, I think it's just sort of innately part of my personality, is I do really enjoy getting to know people and their stories. And I think, as a relationship, professionally or personally, sort of organically evolves, and the more you know about people, it makes you better at your job. What I might ask of you as a potential sponsor or donor or volunteer is not necessarily what I would ask of somebody else, just based on who you are. So I've done a little bit of everything. Coffees. What's nice about the most, in building relationships and doing sort of PR with the community, is it's a great place to give a tour. So I get to walk people around and talk about what we do. But you name it, I've done it, and I've actually used social media a lot for meeting people and for engaging with people. Um, uh, just this morning on my personal Facebook, like, we have a beer tasting this Friday. I'm selling raffle tickets for a Volvo, like all of these things for the museum. Where social media is a great way to connect with people. And I've done that a lot. I've sold, people are amazed that you can sort of sell a sponsorship or even, make a friend that way. But you really can if you're, I think, if you're using it right and you're genuine about it. And but I'm a firm believer, just in general, that it- there's no one there's no one way to do something. And so for me, I always find a little bit of everything seems to do the trick.
Yeah. No, I really am a fan of following you on social media because I think personally I can learn something from you because I very much, especially building this company in the space of looking for sponsors and trying to make connections. But you really do come across so just casual and authentic on social media. And I think that's why it works because it really feels like you. Whereas, people that are in your position, there's a lot of things on your plate and it's easy to kind of pass off social media to an assistant or someone else to handle it. But I think, consumers of media are just they've gotten so much smarter and they can tell when something is super it's almost like too perfect and too refined and almost they can feel that barrier like this like I can't almost I think a lot of leaders can almost just seem inaccessible, you know what I mean? So,
I think so too.
you
But
have
I
to be
think people
approachable.
forget the point of it is to be accessible, and it is to be, um certainly sometimes, strategic, but generally sort of organic, and uh I'm glad that my sort of, like, easy uh personality comes through in that. I try to use it thoughtfully and strategically, but also, sort of simply, right? Because that's the whole point, is it can be, a spur of the moment thing that you just want to share with people, or it can be just a great, another way to get a message out. But I'm also one of those people who, um, I don't separate myself, Lauren Kochian, and all of the things about me, hockey mom, and loves Dave Matthews, and loves to walk her dogs, from Lauren, the leader at the museum who manages 40 staff and is responsible for fulfilling this mission. It's you can't I just for me, I can't distinguish. That's all one person. What makes me good at my job is, um, innately because of who I am. So I don't try to, um, especially on social media, not necessarily in a board meeting or wherever, but, especially on social media, I don't feel the need to necessarily differentiate. Not that I'm going to post my daughter's field hockey pictures on LinkedIn the way I do on Facebook, but I am who I am in any of those outlets and in person. So hopefully you're not meeting me for the first time and be like, oh God, she's totally different than I expected.
Yeah, that's not the goal, right?
Exactly.
Hey everyone, I want to take a moment and tell you about an incredible community that's making a real difference for women in Central New York. Are you a growth-minded woman looking for a supportive and dynamic community? Look no further. The Collective by CNY Women's Network is built on core values that foster personal and professional growth, ensuring you have the support you need to succeed and live your best life. In the Collective by CNY Women's Network, we celebrate women's successes, collaborate on community initiatives, and create our own opportunities. We're committed to making Central New York a more dynamic and prosperous place to live and build our legacies. Whether you're an entrepreneur, a professional, or someone that's just looking to connect with like-minded women, this community is here for you. It's a platform where women are seen, feel connected, and can make their dreams come true. Join the Collective by CNY Women's Network today and become a part of a community that's all about empowerment, growth, and making a positive impact. To join, you can visit cnywomensnetwork.com/join for more information and use the code Cultivate10 at checkout to get 10% off your first month or year with us. That's Cultivate10 at checkout to get 10% off your first month or year with the Collective. So join the Collective by CNY Women's Network today, and your journey to success will be celebrated and supported every step of the way. So I do want to talk about you being a single mom while very much growing a big career. You became the president of the Most 6 years ago. And I mean, even before you became president, I'm sure you were managing a lot of different projects and really big things. What was that? What was it like being a single mom and also, you know, forging a really inspiring path? Was there struggle or maybe some things that you had to accept and overcome or
Sure. Yeah, definitely. The first thing I think about is the first thing that comes to mind is just being tired. I remember often feeling just kind of like drained. So, not just physically, but mentally drained a lot. There's always a lot to balance um, in being a single mom, I think. You sort of have to be on top of your schedule, their schedule, everything that's sort of going on. I'm still one of those people, even though my kids are older and a little more independent. I tee up my entire week on a Sunday. Here's the week ahead, and then every day the night before, I tee up the following day. So, being organized and having strategies like that helps. But um, I was also very, very fortunate that surrounded by family, friends, and even colleagues and supervisors who were understanding and flexible. And I never had to miss like a parent teacher conference because of work. Um, I didn't necessarily have to miss too many games or things like that. And that was because of um, the people that supervised me and led me at the time that allowed me that luxury. Uh, because I actually think if I didn't have it, I wouldn't necessarily be in those positions. I would have tried to find something that gave me that balance. Um, but it's exhausting. You're often moving from the time you wake up to the time you go to sleep, and um, but for me, there was a lot of joy in that. Um, it's rewarding, even if I'm doing laundry at like 11 o'clock at night and I'm tired. There's almost like some kind of a for me like recognition of the fact like that I'm fortunate that this is great. Like I'm tired, but how lucky am I that I have these two great kids and this great job? And it was like good tired in a way. Most of the time, sometimes just flat out stressful. And especially in nonprofit work, you do a lot of fundraising events. So those times of year, event leading up to events could be stressful and challenging. But again, I had a great support system. Their dad was very involved. My parents always helped. I had understanding supervisors and even understanding subordinates. My team often understood that I'm a career woman and I'm always going to work hard for the museum, but my family always comes first. So they've gotten used to the emails from me at 6 in the morning or 11 o'clock at night. Like, and I think that is part of it too, is for me, recognizing that in this day and age, there are certainly moments where I put work down or I put the phone away or whatever that looks like. But by and large, I'm always working. I'm either thinking about work or taking an opportunity for work. Um, but I don't think I would have had um, the success I had in the workplace and as a mom without a lot of support. And I think that that's important for women to keep in mind is I might have, on the surface appear that, I'm just like doing it all. And I am, right? But not without people having my back and being really understanding. And vice versa. I try to do the same for my team. If I'm pretty flexible. In fact, we had a job opening and I was interviewing several candidates and I make a point to say to people, I'm never going to say no to your kid's thing or your dentist appointment or, you can flex that time as long as your work's getting done. I understand how important that aspect of life is. And generally I find that, as cliche as it might sound, um, the more you do that for your people, the more you lean into people, the more you really do get out of them. People remember that and appreciate it, really. So,
I think this is like the exact reason why it's so important to have women in leadership roles, because this level of flexibility, adaptability, and grace, honestly, it's sad that it still seems so shocking and new when I hear stories like this, but it really is. And I'm sure when you've, come into, well, you mentioned before we started recording that you were actually the only mom in the organization, right? Is that still true?
no, it's not true as of recently. We have now, I think, two moms on staff, actually. But I totally agree with you. I think that Um, certainly everybody is different and everybody brings who they are and their experience regardless of gender. But I do believe that science is science, right? Biology is biology. Women, I do think, have an innate, um, whether you're a mother or not, there's an innate nurturing that I think women tend to have. Not all women, certainly. And I think that is a wonderful quality for a leader to have, certainly. Um, it's not that I uh, necessarily treat my staff as children necessarily, but there is a level of empathy, nurturing, and caring that goes on when you sort of look at people as people, right? You got to meet people where they are, which is one of the, I think, an important thing in leadership, and that changes depending on who you're dealing with and working with, and where they are in their life too. Um, People I've worked with long term, I've seen evolve and change, and that sort of changes how you work with them. But recognizing that's really important. And I do, because again, I've been there. So I will always afford somebody that luxury um, of ha- being flexible and having a life outside of work. And actually though, I will say, I think, I do think COVID helped us as a sort of society also make that shift a little um, with the environment of the workplace. I think in part too because we realized that people can be counted on to be working while they're home and that kind of a thing. So I think that that's helped generally. But regardless, I always try to be that type of leader and supervisor.
Yeah. It's not only that, having more empathy and compassion, just space for people will get you further. Yes, from a strategic standpoint, but I think that even it creates like a safer space for innovation and creativity to happen. And I think, just the traditional um, means of getting things done, maybe in corporate spaces up until now, that sort of those strict boundaries and expectations. It's and almost intimidation. Like I just don't under I don't understand how any leader thinks that that is the most effective way to get things done. But, aside from empathy and a true, interest and like for people, which is what you've been talking about, honestly, what else do you think makes a really great leader?
Well, I think there's a lot of things, and certainly, I do consider myself sort of a people person and compassionate, empathic. But I also, you also have to recognize, I think, as a leader, you have a job to do, and how do you deal with, how you deal with things that don't really, um, or employees that don't necessarily align with your mission, right? Or who aren't filling the role the way they're supposed to. So recognizing that too. There's also a time where um uh tough conversations need to be had, um and being a good leader is knowing when, right? Uh how do you redirect somebody who's not necessarily performing or doing what you expect of them? And when do you give second chances, third chances? So again, I think reading people and knowing people really helps. I often tell my staff I'm a problem solver. So I want them to look at me in that respect. Um, and I think that's important as a leader, and meaning that I'm not going to micromanage you. I'm not going to babysit you, but I am here to help. I'm here to solve problems. I'm here to troubleshoot. I think that's a really important characteristic too. Um, Really is having people's backs. I think that's important. Being present, um, physically or otherwise. To your point about sort of nurturing innovation and creativity, there we live in this time where yes, there's no reason to be anything other than a nurturing leader. Um, when we have things like email and social media, and we've made this workplace environment as efficient as we can make it for now, right? So that should be opening up your people to have that creativity, to feel safe, to think outside of the box, so to speak. So those things I think are really important to me. Two things um, that I always say to my team as far as my expectations is to be competent and to be kind. Those are the two things you need to work for me or work anywhere, right? Being competent, meaning knowing how to do your job, doing your job well, showing up, but being kind. I think that that's sometimes overlooked as a really important characteristic in the workplace and outside of the workplace. But being kind to yourself, being kind to one another, being kind to your client, or depending on whatever it is you do, um, that is not only important for your work, but it makes your work so much better and rewarding. Um, I think particularly with one another. And so my staff hear me actually say that pretty often. You have to, the ideal employee is both of those things, competent and kind. But you better be at least one of them, right? So I often say that, and I think another little sort of leadership cliche, but it's true. Um, just lean in as best as you can, and sometimes you have to lean in further to meet people where they are, and sometimes not so much. But always try to lean in, support, teach. Much like parenting, I will say also model. I try to model what I expect. Model the hard work, model, whatever the behavior is that you want your employees to also do.
Yeah. Yeah, the modeling thing is huge too. And I've caught myself in situations where it's like, why am I getting mad or just frustrated at someone when I'm not even doing the thing that like
Right.
I want them to do, right?
Exactly. Oh,
So,
yes, we've all been there, trust me.
there's a lot of humility that goes into being a leader, and I
Yep.
think that everyone thinks it's all fun and games until they realize that like you quite literally have to be excellent. You know what I mean? Because of that modeling aspect, and you can't be a hypocrite, right? So if you want to be a leader that can lean on and trust others to help you grow, you got to be holding up your end of the bargain.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But when you don't, and let's face it, we don't all the time, I make mistakes often. But you have to be willing to obviously recognize that, right? And walk things back. I've said that to my team too. Part of, in our case, uh growing the business, changing the business model a little requires change, right? And I'm the first person to say, we can walk this back if it's a mistake. We can try something. If it doesn't work, I will take the blame. Um, but let's just try it. I think also one of the things that a good leader does, I think, first innately, but also practices, and it's another thing that I've tried to not necessarily model, but sometimes point out to my staff, is a good leader can do a quick assessment, right, of projects, of programs, of whatever, a challenge, from every angle, right? Who are your stakeholders, and what are the pros and cons for every stakeholder sort of involved in a decision or um, a change or a problem? And I think I do sort of naturally do that. I try, and I deliberately try to do it, but I also try to, when we make a decision, let's say somebody doesn't agree with me, and that's certainly happened. Here's why I think that this is the right way to go, and here are all the perspectives that I'm thinking about. And it is important, for you to recognize it from your perspective or your department's perspective. But I'm looking at all the things, right? And if I still have it wrong, again, we can change. I've made a million mistakes, and that's what happens when, we're in this business of helping kids and supporting people, and it's a public facing institution, and we have a board and we have a staff. I mean, mistakes happen, as long as you can recognize them, right? I think that's really, really another important leadership characteristic. Don't expect everything to go perfectly, especially when you're trying to grow and make big changes. What I often have said in the last few years, the most is actually experiencing growing pains. Growth is great, but there's a lot of things to consider that go along with it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point to make. The growing pains of growing, right? Um, that's an interesting perspective
Yeah,
for
growth
sure.
sounds great, right? Because you think more money, more people, more this, but yeah, there's a lot of things that go along with it, um, and I think part of that is you don't necessarily know how to plan for those until you're faced with them.
But it sounds to me like just your actually now I think about earlier in the conversation when you were talking about um eagerly raising sponsorships and you're like maybe it was a little naive of me, but there is this almost sort of slight delusion I feel like that needs to happen in order to be a great leader because you need to be the one that shows up with the confidence and the willingness to take risk. Most people most people don't want to do that, but that's I think one of your biggest jobs as the leader. And then also to just say, "Listen, I will take I will you can blame it all on me. Like you can default to me and I will be able to carry this, but let's go for it."
Yep. Yeah, I think in nonprofits too, a lot of nonprofits are risk averse because we do have a different business model, and you are relying on your community for support. So you don't want to make mistakes, you don't want to take risks, but it's just as important in a nonprofit to grow and to evolve and to take risks. And yeah, I do think sometimes having a big vision um, is it could be naive, right? Um, it could be crazy, but that's a huge important part of evolving and growing and changing is, and especially as a leader, sort of keeping the vision of where you want to be next year and in 5 years and in 10 years, and maintaining that for the institution, keeping the vision for everybody, right? While also managing the day to day whether it gets, sometimes managing the day to day is not to get you to that place. It's just managing the day to day, putting out fires, dealing with the present. But the combination of both is really important. How do you manage the day to day to keep that long term vision, right? And it's important um, and not always easy, right? Sometimes you get so bogged down in like piddly stuff that you don't want to be dealing with, but you have to. And I think recognizing that those little things are still really important in your day to day. There's some days where my office is a revolving door of people, and it could be big picture things like a major exhibit installation or an education program with the city schools, or it could be we need a new popcorn vendor. But all of those things are really important, even if they don't necessarily seem like it in the moment. It all matters, and taking the time, the appropriate amount of time on something like popcorn or concession stand, um, and taking the appropriate amount of time on a major exhibit. It all that I think is where the growth and the success come from.
Yeah, everyone just sees the results, but they don't see the day to day behind the scenes. And like for someone that, practices gratitude while she's folding laundry at 11 p.m., yeah, coming back to that vision is
Mhm.
probably what gets you through.
It definitely does. It does. And I think uh the vision too, it's because it's for everybody, right? Like the vision, what I want for the most is not just what I want for the most, but it's what I want for our community. It's what I want for students. And uh that really sort of keeping that at top of mind while managing the day to day is where you're going to have success and feel that you're doing something impactful.
Like not making life hard just by thinking about how hard it all is, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. That's
I mean,
exactly
at the end
right.
of the day, I've personally been dealing with like, I'm catching myself in these just in a that's what happens when you're burnt out, I think, but you can catch yourself in these negative thought patterns and just get so consumed by the overwhelm, but then you have to like remember I asked for this. I literally manifested this and I am so lucky to be able to do this and call this work. So it's like,
There's
yeah,
always going to
that
be
flip.
bad days, bad moments, bad weeks, even. You know, nothing. I believe this. God, I'm like one big cliche, but I really do believe if something is worth it, it's difficult, right? Um, but yeah, you have to you have to sort of take one challenge at a time, one moment at a time, and know that really the negative stuff is generally temporary, right? It's just part of the journey, part of the path. And and it's to be expected, right? If everything actually goes really seamlessly and well, you're probably doing something wrong, quite frankly, right? You might be missing something important if it all goes really smoothly.
Yeah, and I think that as if you want to grow any sort of organization or do anything big, you have to start to kind of like being uncomfortable and kind of enjoy the hard work. Otherwise, you're not going to have fun because it's day in day out stuff. But you already said that when you are tired and you are working hard every day, you still find the joy in that. And I mean, it's no surprise that you've had such an amazing career because that's the mindset to have, I'm sure. So,
It is, and I mean, it's taken me a while to get to that place, though. But I'm so fortunate. I am fortunate in the work that I do, and I sometimes think if I had a different trajectory, if I worked in a for-profit or a corporate environment, would I feel the same? Would I be a leader in a place like that where I might not have the same level of joy? My all of my days are kind of different, so that really makes it interesting and exciting. But I stop myself sometimes from thinking along those lines because I remind myself, well, this is why I'm good at my work, because this is where I should be. This is the kind of work I should be doing. Um, I do find it rewarding and meaningful. And if I wasn't doing it, I'd probably have to find that reward in maybe other ways. But I do think that, um, you know, sort of, finding the joy in, um, even sort of the temporary challenges, and um, that that should be no matter what you do, leadership or not, right? Um, but it did take me a long time to get to that place. But I like working, period. I enjoy hard work. I remind myself too, and I've reminded my staff during stressful times, we're not, this is hard. This is stressful. A, it's temporary. B, we're lucky that we aren't in the business of saving lives. We're just in the business of making lives better, right? So let's not worry too much about maybe things we can't control, or things that didn't go as we planned, and sort of worry about the things we can control and we can plan, knowing that we're doing really great, important work.
I do want to talk about the most because I know what the most is because I
Yep.
had my third birthday there.
That's right.
But I also lived in Armory Square for a little bit and had a nice view of it for a while. And so yes, let's talk about what is the most for anyone who's listening that doesn't know, and what are you guys up to right now, and how are you currently growing the organization?
So the most is the Milton J. Rubenstein Museum of Science and Technology. We are a science museum. We are the Armory of Armory Square. And our mission is to provide informal science education experiences that are hands-on and that are fun. And how we do that is through science exhibits that are actually geared for K through 8 primarily, though we do try to make a visit appealing for the adult or the caregiver that might be coming with a kid. And we do that through a lot of science exhibits. We touch on so many different science topics: dinosaurs, outer space, um, uh, rocks. We have a huge science playhouse, which is great for. We're a weather destination, so we're very busy when it's cold. We're very busy when it's rainy. So a science playhouse for kids to come and burn off energy. And more recently, so everything you'd expect, I think, from a science museum that's geared towards kids, but more recently have taken more of um, a different approach with some of our exhibits, where we have a micron exhibit that's about semiconductors and memory. We have a telecommunications exhibit, which you wouldn't necessarily think of when you think of a science museum. But one of the ways the most has evolved, that has been very intentional on my part and on in the institution's part, is making it a destination for STEM education, right? In particular. So obviously they're learning about STEM, whether they're doing dinosaurs or building blocks, but being a little more intentional about it. And that is, so as far as exhibits go, we have a lot of more recent exhibits that actually tie into our local workforce. And Micron is actually a perfect example of that. Exposing kids to science and education in a way that is hands-on, in a way that is fun, is always going to be the primary objective, because we want to develop our future workforce in STEM. And that's unique to Central New York. If you go to a museum downstate in New York City or a different market, you're not going to necessarily see that. But and I think that is where my passion for the museum comes into play, is that we live in this community in Central New York where there are hundreds, if not thousands, of opportunities to work in STEM. And when I say STEM, it's science, technology, engineering, and to me, the M is math, medicine, manufacturing. There are so many great careers available to students here. They're great jobs. They have great benefits. They're the kind of job that they have the potential to give people the kind of life they want, right? Where you can raise a family in a good school district and you can pay your bills and you can live comfortably. And at the same time, these jobs um, go unfilled. People get recruited from outside of central New York. We don't have the workforce here. We need to develop the workforce here. We don't want our kids to go someplace else. We don't want, or worse, our kids to not have the skill set to work in these jobs, which some of them don't even require a 4-year degree. And then at the same time, there's this sort of other side of this in our community where we have really largely impoverished urban and rural communities. And so these kids aren't necessarily getting ready for these jobs. So to me, the most is sort of part of this opportunity. And again, I like solving problems. We can help be a solution. Among other people. It can't just obviously be the most. The companies that have these jobs need to get involved. The schools need to get involved. Parents need to get involved. Community groups besides the most need to be involved in the middle there, between the job, between the student, to really give kids an opportunity for a great life here. And so, and that's what I want to see, because I've seen where kids are just not getting enough to even want to pursue things like this. And I think that is where the most comes into play, and not just with our exhibits. Exhibits are half of our story. They're half of what we do. We have amazing programs, daily, weekly, monthly, annually, most of which are free, to really get kids interested in STEM. And if to me, if one kid has an experience that makes them want to study STEM or take one of these jobs, we've done our job. But I know there's so much more out there. Whether it's we have a monthly Be the Scientist program where we touch on a different STEM career. It's totally free to participate. Admission to the museum is free. Your whole family gets in free. We have what we call impact programs, which are based on our core values of inclusion and access, where we do things like sensory-friendly science for kids with special needs. We have a Future Women in STEM series with MACNY, and that's really cool because it's all about manufacturing. You don't think of manufacturing in women, but there's a huge need for that. So to me, the most really is this community asset, besides just what you think of when you think of science or a museum. We're so much more than that. We're really an education center. And again, a safe place for kids to come for free in a lot of cases, to learn in maybe an environment that's tailored just to them, as well as just this sort of whole museum experience. And that is where I think that, my sort of fundraising and marketing and social media background has really helped the most, because I look at it and treat it a little bit differently than your perception might be of the museum. You're just driving by this big brooding brick building. You don't necessarily know what's going on in there because you can't see in. There's no windows, and it is so much more than that. And that's why even as like a non-science person, I can get excited about it, because the museum has an opportunity to really make a huge impact when the whole community sort of, gets involved.
Yes. And it's like, you talk about, like, it's almost like an opportunity. What you guys are creating is like a funnel to the opportunity through your programs, not just through the exhibits. And I mean, I haven't heard you explain this before, and like just listening to it got me fired up, because it truly is like some of the most impactful work going on here in this region, especially with the new investments into the area around STEM and, technology and manufacturing. So I'm so excited about it. If there's anyone who is maybe in the STEM space that is particularly passionate about this mission and giving back to their community, is there any opportunities for people to get involved with the most?
Absolutely. We, a lot of ways, we're always looking for volunteers, in part because we do have so many programs that go on, And some are just, general, don't really need any sort of tremendous science background or even any background, depending on the event. If it's something specific to science, technology, engineering, and math, we have programs all year long. We need judges for our science fair. We need volunteers. Some of our STEM challenges, as we call them, we have a couple hundred kids participate. And so even just helping out with those, they're only a few a year. Volunteering is really an important aspect. And it's cool because you can do 1 hour once a year, or you can come every weekend and participate in programs. Certainly always looking for people to make donations. I think people don't necessarily realize that the operational side of our business is only half of our budget. We really do rely on donations and sponsorships for the other half because so many things are free, because our 115-year-old building is costly to maintain. So whether you're coming to a fundraising event, of which we have many throughout the year, even just buying a membership, people buy an annual membership. Then they consider that a donation to the most. Those things really all help too. And again, like I said, even we were talking, I don't remember if this was on camera or not, but we talk about even just spreading the word, letting people know what we do, reposting something. We don't do a lot of advertising. We rely on word of mouth. We rely on sort of top of mind social media. So even if you're just sort of sharing the work we do, that's a great way to help.
Yeah, I definitely think sharing goes a long way, especially just spreading awareness around what goes on inside of that building, right? We do have, I see it from our networking events. We actually have a lot of young people moving to the area. We get them at our events all the time now. I'm like, wow, why'd you move to Syracuse? But no, I try not to say that because things are changing, right? But yeah, no, people need to know. I haven't been to the most in many, many years, but I knew that things have been changing and there's always a new exhibit you guys are working on. So definitely.
Exactly. And you might not. I mean, you had your third birthday party there. You may not necessarily have a come again until you're hosting a third birthday party, right? It is a narrow range of visitors and members, but that doesn't mean the entire community can't be involved in some way. I think, especially like I said, as somebody without a science background, for me, it's also just appreciating how important a place like the most is for our community. So if people don't necessarily visit but can support in those other ways, a science museum like that in a community like this has a real opportunity to have some tremendous impact.
So if someone wants to make an impact or even just get a hold of you, how can people reach you in the most?
Oh gosh, a million different ways. So most.org is our website, which actually all of my contact information is on there. My email, my cell phone, my landline phone at the museum. And then our most social media is at most Syracuse. But yes, I'm active every day on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Instagram. I think I'm Lauren Kochian everywhere. So I'm generally pretty responsive in all those places too. So if anybody has any questions or, it should be pretty easy to find me.
Yeah, I love that about you too. That's amazing. All right, guys, that is it for this week's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in to Cultivate CNY. If you enjoyed this episode, I would love it if you left us a review and make sure you're subscribed to the show. Speaking of the show, if you know anyone or if you are interested in being our next guest on Cultivate CNY, be sure to submit us an application. You can just click the link in the show notes. And if you're a business owner that's interested in getting in front of our audience, you can go ahead and email us at podcast@cnywomensnetwork.com to learn more about sponsorship and advertising opportunities. All right, that's it for now. I'll catch you guys next Monday. Thank you.